weaving stories of history and diversity into the new Waltham High School. Everyone has an opinion on the new Waltham High School. Everyone is interested in the new Waltham High School. It's the most exciting event in this city, especially right now. We have the SMMA design team here that's going to explain the process that inspired the visual content that is really going to be a big part of 21st century education, especially with a new high school. A lot of what's happening there is going to be cutting edge. It's going to be some of the most imitated and most copied experience and example that education can provide. I'm not going to go any further. What I'm going to do is introduce you to Allison Ucci, who is an associate at SMMA and the graphic design manager. Allie and I have had a number of conversations. She's a wonderful person to work with, and I would like to say, take it away, Allie.
Thank you, Wayne. That was very formal. I appreciate it. I was just going to say I'm on the graphic design team, so I appreciate that. I'm really happy to be here tonight. I started talking to Wayne probably back in April about what we were trying to do with the environmental graphics at the new school, and we can only get so far on our own. I'm not an expert at Waltham, and we were so happy that Wayne and Rachel were able to help us. So I think that Jack here on SMMA team is going to share a screen, and it's coming. I think the very first slide is just the 5 members of the SMMA team that are here tonight, and I'm going to let the others introduce themselves. So once we see their faces on the next slide. Okay, so we'll start from the left.
Good evening. My name is Lorraine Finnegan. I am the very proud project manager, project director of the Waltham High School project. I'm a breezer. I've been here for 20 years. Mort is actually my neighbor, and my house is probably one of those that is covered in his study. I will tell you that I've been working on this project a long time, and it's really important to me and to this team that every student, staff, parent, citizen who walks through the front doors of Waltham High School sees more than just the bricks and mortar that make the building, but they feel the experience of being in that building. They feel that it belongs to Waltham, that it is one Waltham, and that it is designed specifically for Waltham. And I think the team has done a tremendous job, and I'm so excited to have you see their work tonight and their very talented work. And I'm here for moral support. Take it away, Sarah.
Thanks, Lorraine. Hi, everybody. My name is Sarah Long, and I'm an interior designer with SMMA.
My name is Jack Dombrowski, and I'm a graphic designer at SMMA.
And we'll skip Allie. She already had her amazing introduction. I am Hillary Dutton. I'm also on the graphic design team at SMMA.
So Lorraine, did you want to say anything further about the project? You got a great introduction already, but if there's anything you want to say further, let us know.
Well, the only thing I wanted to mention is that we also have the current superintendent of schools here tonight. I just happened to notice that taking attendance. I wanted to welcome him tonight. Thank you.
Yeah. Good evening, Dr. Regan. So I think most people in Waltham know about this project. You know where it is. A lot of planning goes into a school of this size, this nature. The scope of educational delivery today has changed so much from how we all went to school. The education that was delivered at 617, where education is going, particularly at a high school, which is more like a college level at this point, really preparing our students for career and college level, merging the Chapter 74 programs in with the academics to be seamless so that there's no separation of any student in this school. They can all experience and witness the great work that every student is doing, whether it is in automotive, culinary, or English. And I think that's what's truly blended into a beautiful building that will be at 554 Lexington Street that is going up. The steel is there. I was there this morning. As you drive by, you'll see it. We're going to open in 2024, the 2024-25 school year. And I think everybody is just very excited for the next transformation of education in Waltham. This is a rendering of the front of the building. In the middle, you'll see the gymnasium. Top left is the media center. We no longer refer to it as a library. These spaces have evolved. They're far more than a library today. And the top right is the front entrance door. This building has both sides to it. It has a front and a back, but the back is not really a back door as you would see at 617 today. It's really, this building will be viewed on all sides, and it's really important that every entrance and exit feels as important to everybody entering this building. Next slide, Jack.
Great. Thank you very much. So again, I'm Sarah Long. I'm the interior designer on the project, and I'm going to talk for a few minutes just to kind of give a little bit of background on the interior design concepts, just to give a little bit of context regarding the framework that the environmental graphics team had to work with on the project. Wonderful. So I'll talk a little bit about some of our guiding principles throughout the project. During our programming meetings and focus groups, three main design concepts really emerged. The school mascot pride of the Waltham Hawks, a maker tradition with historic ties to the Boston Manufacturing Company, as well as the Waltham Watch Company. And finally, the importance of connecting the community to nature. So we'll look at each of these a bit more and how they guided our material and color selections, as well as the environmental graphics package. So the first concept we explored was the Waltham Hawks. The red-tailed hawk is the most common hawk in Waltham, as I'm sure a lot of you know. I did not. So that was the source of our inspiration for looking at organic shapes and radial geometry, as well as the layering of texture and a natural variety of colors. There you go, thank you. The next concept we focused on was the maker tradition of Waltham. So we were inspired by the textures, weaving and pattern making of the Boston Manufacturing Company, as well as the radial elements and timeless quality of the Waltham Watch Company. So this is definitely a concept that you'll see continue to evolve throughout the project and the presentation. And the final concept was the importance of maintaining a connection to nature. So again, we're seeing a lot of repeating elements. We're seeing the radial geometry, as well as a natural variety of colors and shapes. So another portion of our guiding principles surrounded the color palette concept, which was developed through a series of focus group meetings and approved by the school building committee early in the project. So we were tasked with providing a color palette based on themes of nature that could be applied to identify the different academic wings or the building levels to enhance wayfinding within the project. So the colors were to be within a range of reds, oranges, yellows, blues, and greens to coordinate with a stone look and a wood tone base palette. So although we wanted to provide a neutral base palette with timeless materials, we also really wanted to make sure that the overall feel of the interior was warm and welcoming, as opposed to cold and institutional. So as you can see, we started to integrate some wood tones and warmer grays, and that was one of the pieces to really help us achieve that. Then we began to layer on accents to help with placemaking and evoking different moods in the building. So we focused on saturated jewel tones and gradients, again, found in nature, as well as colors found in the Waltham City seal. So when looking to implement these concepts, it was important for us to connect each academic cluster vertically. So the fine and performing arts wing was assigned navy blue, as identified by the #1 arrow in this diagram. The health, wellness, and athletics wing was given Waltham red. The humanities wing is a vibrant orange, and the STEM wing was assigned a forest green. A neutral gray was chosen for the core to really act as a color blender for the other wings. And it really lets the activities as well as the environmental graphics pop, as it's the heart of the school. So we really wanted to focus the attention there as opposed to a color application. So this theory really helped the team fine-tune product selections and again, guided the environmental graphic design development, which we'll dive into more detail now.
Thanks, Sarah. So to start off the environmental graphics section, I wanted to just sort of do a brief overview of what environmental graphic design is, and then how we set our goals for this project. So the Society for Experiential Graphic Design, which is our professional organization, defines it this way, and I won't read the slide to you, but essentially what it says is we apply graphic design to create environments that communicate. And so essentially, through wayfinding systems, architectural graphics, and other types of design, we try to approach how does graphic design apply to the built environment, and how do we work cross-discipline with folks in interior design and architecture. And maybe the easier way to think about that is to just look at some different forms of environmental graphics. So on this slide, you can see some more traditional forms, some signage, wayfinding, informational signage, some large format typography, all the way through artwork and architectural elements to digital displays, projections, and even like tactile walls, sensory walls. And then, so understanding what graphic design is, we can start to talk about how we approach this project. And so how we approach a project generally, this is basically our goal template, okay? So environmental graphic design aims to support project design principles. That's what Sarah just described to us. Promote specific behaviors, thoughts, and emotions. That's how we want people to feel and experience the space. And then develop a cohesive design that reinforces the placemaking and wayfinding elements throughout the project and allows for users to optimize their experience within the space. All that to say, we want people to be able to navigate the space, know where they are, and have the full experience of the space that was intended by the design team. And so when we apply that to any individual project like Waltham High School, we have to ask ourselves a few key questions. And these are in no particular order, really, because they all play on each other in different ways. So to start, what is the content? That's the story and messaging. Essentially, what does the graphic say? That could be as simple as eat healthy in the cafeteria to a much more, or perhaps encouraging students to feel empathy through the narrative of a historical person or event. We ask ourselves, where is it going? The context and environment that this graphic is going to be in. Is it going to be in the media center, or is it going to be in the gym? Those are two very different environments and have very different experiences associated with them. And then what does it look like? Is it going to be illustrations? Is it going to be photography? Are we going to do it in natural materials or more industrial materials, perhaps? And so these questions we ask ourselves, we ask the design team, we do some research on the city and the town and try to get more information about the project to ultimately decide on what our goals for the project are going to be. So for Waltham High School, the environmental graphic design goals were to connect students, staff, and community to the space, celebrate Waltham's culture and history, motivate and prepare students for life after high school, and develop a cohesive design that reinforces all that I discussed earlier. And so now Allie's going to take over from here and discuss a little bit more about how we applied these goals and where they took us in the design process.
Thanks, Jack. So going forward with the presentation, we thought it would be really helpful to just organize it by our phases. And we did everything with the support and the feedback of a specific focus group over the course of months. So we want to walk you through how we conducted our research, developed our themes, how we developed a content plan, how we executed and developed a style, and finally, we want to show you examples of the work that is going into the high school. So starting with the surveys, we came in early enough that we were able to conduct surveys with 3 key groups of people: the community, the staff, and the students. And we had an amazing amount of responses. We had over 700 students responded to our survey. And just to give a little bit more context to this, the 3 surveys were completely different. We asked the community 6 or 7 different questions, then we asked staff, and now we asked students. We were looking for something from each group. From the community, we really wanted to know how they viewed the city and how they envisioned the high school benefiting the community. And from staff, we really wanted to know how students learn the most, when are the students the most engaged in learning. And from the students, we really wanted to hear what they were passionate about. So we can't go over everything we got from the survey, although I found it really fascinating. What we decided to do tonight was just pick one question from each of the 3 surveys and show you how we analyzed it. So when we took the community survey, as an example, one of the questions was, how do you describe Waltham to your friends and your family? And what we took away from this was 2 things. We have a table on the left where we started tallying words that were being repeated and repeated and repeated. And we saw right away that the diversity of Waltham was a key factor in how people described that city. And the history and the industrial aspect of Waltham was also something they would tell their friends and family about. And on the right, what we really did for our benefit is we took some of like the best, the well-worded responses to kind of remind ourselves of what we were doing here. And then on the next slide, we have a sample question from the staff survey. And that question is, what skills do you want students to leave high school with? And as Lorraine mentioned, that these students are possibly going in 3 different directions. They're going to college, or they're going right to the community, or they're going to further vocational school. And we learned a lot of key traits that staff would like students to learn before they leave the high school. They want them to be prepared for the real life. They want them to learn critical thinking skills, empathy, responsibility to the community, sense of culture, life skills. So we kept that in mind when we started going through these surveys. And then we asked the students how they liked to learn best. This question was great because we got overwhelming responses that students really like hands-on work. So that was something we took away from these 3 surveys. And again, we had about 6 or 7 questions in each, and we did this for every question. What we did after this was we started thinking about what themes we could use as foundations for the graphics. We ended up with 5 themes, and we will just show you one example of how we came up with a theme. One of the, I would say, the most overarching theme, most popular theme was diversity and inclusion. And what we're looking at right here is those tally charts that we made from the community, from the staff, and from the students. And we started highlighting what we thought were related themes. So you see diversity, you see community, sense of culture, being welcoming, being diverse, helping others. Those all to us indicate that diversity and inclusion should be one of our themes. So we did this a little bit more, and we ended up with 5 themes that were going to serve as the foundation for our content, our research, and our graphic style. We wanted to make sure that we were exemplifying diversity in culture, thought, and discovery. We wanted to promote stories of change and reform. We wanted to instill tools of good communication, celebrate crafts, and instill character attributes that will prepare students for life after high school. So now we have our themes that were based off of our surveys, which came directly from Waltham residents and students. We needed to think about content. And before we approached the Historical Society about what content we could use, we really needed to figure out how to organize this strategically and deliver the right content to the best locations. And again, going to the next slide, we really wanted to use those 5 themes as our foundation. We really, really liked the idea of attributes that attributes or characteristics that are an ideal Waltham citizen. So what we did was we brainstormed some characteristics of what that might be. Someone who is inclusive, someone who supports activism. What does that mean? We came up with a list of these words that we think exemplify these themes. And now the next step on our list was, how do we find stories stemming from Waltham that represent those words well? So in addition to coming up with the attributes, we had to make sure that we were connecting our stories to the programming. And as Sarah mentioned, the school is divided into 5 areas, 4 academic areas: fine and performing arts on 1, health, wellness, athletics, humanities, and STEM. we wanted to make sure that our content supported all 4 of these. So we have this step 3 is how did we find content and then translate it into graphic. So starting with those attributes, they were really based off of our themes and the foundation. We wanted to showcase to the students what empathetic means. We had to think about what stories coming from Waltham might be good representations of that. So one example that you're going to see later, now you're going to see soon and you're going to see later, is a Waltham figure, Alfred Worcester, and how he helped pioneer the Waltham Training School for Nurses, which really gave way to how nurses were trained. So these are stories that we started thinking about. And then we also have supporting stories, which might not necessarily be directly from Waltham, but in this case, it was another doctor giving a speech about Alfred Worcester, and his quote is being used. So the following step is what imagery can we use to create this content visually? So we can do portraits, we can do historical photos of the building of the training school for nurses, and we can do large messaging to inspire the students. So I believe I'm passing it off to Hillary right now, who's going to tell you a little bit about how we approached our style.
Okay, thanks, Allie. So getting right into the development of the visual style for the graphics, our first step was to identify a unifying concept. So we've talked a lot about the goals of these of the environmental graphics in the space. And so our number 1 goal here was really visually to support the celebration of diversity and inclusion. Secondly, we knew we needed to support the interior design concept. In this instance, we took a lot of inspiration from the concept of weaving, which, as Sarah mentioned, also honors the history of Waltham with the Boston Manufacturing Company. And then ultimately, we wanted to make sure that we were developing a unified identity system that would allow us to help connect graphics throughout the space. The second step was, of course, research and inspiration and starting to develop these ideas for what the visuals can look like. First, we asked ourselves, how do we visually represent diversity? And something that we were very inspired by was just the idea of showing all different colors and shapes and patterns and textures coming together to create one unified design. Second, we were inspired again by the idea of weaving and recognize that this is an opportunity for students to see themselves. Unique textiles are an aspect of cultures all around the world. And so this is really something that we all have in common, that we could essentially identify elements of our culture that we identify with. So this became a really strong part of our concept. And then lastly, of course, placemaking. So taking into consideration all of the colors that have been laid out in the interior design concept, and creating separate color schemes that can work within the building so that the graphics themselves are still adding to the placemaking. And so the third step, now that we started to form this concept, we wanted to collect materials. So we developed a survey that went to students to allow them the opportunity to submit textiles and fabrics or anything really that they have at home that they identify with their culture. So this was really an opportunity for students to start, providing us with the actual inspiration for the designs that we were creating. And so we started collecting some of these submissions from the students, and this began our development of a library of assets that we could start to use in our designs. And as you can tell, even by looking at this list, this really does reflect the diversity of the Waltham student population. So with this library, in addition to the survey, we also had focus groups with teachers and really wanted to make sure that the list of cultures that we were creating was identifying or representing the Waltham population. And so step 4 in this process was actually something that was inspired by our research into developing this library of textiles. And so what we found was that, in textiles all over the world, symbols are incorporated into these designs as representations for many things. And so we thought that this would be another unique opportunity to sort of bring in the diversity of the students. And so we did, some research to identify what some of these symbols could be that we could create. And so you'll see here, this is the symbol library that we developed. And this really became something that the symbols themselves could be featured as a main element to the design, or in a lot of instances, we use these symbols and created our own patterns with them. And so this is just a quick look at the pattern library that we started to develop. And again, this just became a library of assets that were available to us that we could then connect with the content as it was being created for areas around the school. And below, you'll see that we also applied the same concept of patterning to the STEM wing and the more science focused areas of the school, so that the unified identity system of the graphics would remain the same, but that the patterns would relate to the content. And so the final step is, of course, bringing all of this together. So Ali talked to you about the content and what really drove, how we came to identify what we were going to be representing throughout the school, of course, working with the Historical Society, but now pairing it with the graphic style that we've developed for all these various reasons. So as you'll see here in this example, we are showing a print that we created that speaks to the Ugandan community in Waltham. And so you'll notice we have some of the texture, which is the pattern inspired by an East African textile. We've also included a symbol, which is the crested crane, which is a national emblem of Uganda. It's also featured on their flag. And so this is a really clear opportunity, for students to see themselves in this space or recognize something about their culture. And then, of course, we have, going back to that more abstract pattern of diversity, all the different shapes and colors coming together. So I'm going to hand it back over to Ali, who's going to get into the fun part of the presentation, and we are going to walk you through a number of additional prints that we created.
Thanks, Hillary. So we picked certain case studies of graphic types that we are putting into the school to talk about tonight. And the first one are what we call a poster series. And I will say, full disclosure, I'm a little nervous about presenting these posters because everyone here is a Waltham expert. And we worked with Wayne and Rachel at the Historical Society, but I will just make a note that we will continue to work with them to make sure everything is accurate and everything is credited. So take that as is. One of the reasons that we started exploring a poster system is because we really wanted to get graphics into the hallways outside of the classrooms. And the hallways are generally more narrow. There's not as much wall space. There's not as much room to view what you're looking at. So we wanted to come up with a smaller scaled type of graphic. We really wanted it to be flexible. The school is going to be around for decades and decades to come. And we want the school to feel comfortable with upgrading and updating as they need it. And even if they choose to replace everything in the posters going forward, they can do that. So on the next slide, we're just going to quickly look at where these posters are going. And the point of this slide is to show you that they are mainly going inside of the wings. They're mainly going outside of the academic areas, places where you don't always see graphics. And we wanted to make sure that we allowed for arrangement of a series of graphics. So if we have one amazing story that ties into Waltham, we might want to make 3 or 4 posters out of it. And I think it is worth noting that as we developed this plan, we were challenged by Mayor McCarthy to make sure that we made everything Waltham related. And I think that we did that. We could not have done it without the help of the Historical Society. So what we're looking at here is we have about 130 posters that are going into the high school. And we just did a really quick, simple list of all of the different stories that come from Waltham, whether it is a culture in Waltham or a specific person or a story that happens. We just wanted everyone to be able to see that while we can't show everything tonight, we are touching on all of these topics. The stories and the people that you see in red are the ones we're going to show on the next slide. So outside of the culinary restaurant, we have a great opportunity for a series of posters. And we already knew, I'm not from Waltham, I already know that Moody Street is a huge culinary cultural experience for the city. So we thought it would be great if we do an infographic of Moody Street with all the buildings and all the restaurants illustrated. But instead of writing what restaurant is currently there, because that will change, what we really want to illustrate is what cultures are being represented. So using our symbols that Hillary showed you earlier, we've identified what cuisine or what culture each restaurant represents. The next poster series is in the Performing Fine Arts wing. And this is a tribute to Ida Anna Ryan. Her work as a female and her work and contributions to Waltham. She was a female architect. I'm sure many of you or all of you have heard of her. And this is a really good example of how we've turned one person into a series of prints. We have her portrait illustrating our diversity style and the shapes that Hillary went over. We've connected her with the word inspiring, which is one of our attributes. And then we have another poster that is kind of like a timeline of where she's lived and her presence in Waltham. And on the right, we have a map that we credit the Stonehurst for this, but we found a map of where all of the work she's done in Waltham. In the athletic and wellness wing, we've already shown a couple of these graphics, but we have one series focusing on Alfred Worcester. And he actually has more, there's more posters than this going in this series. I just selected a few of them. But we have a portrait of him and we have paired him with the word empathetic. We have a poster showing the training school for nurses. This is a historical image that came from Reen and Rachel. We have a little blurb down there about why this school is important. We have a quote from Dr. Francis Peabody, and this is him talking of Alfred Worcester, how he changed what caring for a patient meant. And then lastly, what we are trying to do in as many cases as we can, and we can't do it in all because we can't necessarily tie it. We can't necessarily figure out exactly where they're from, but like Alfred Worcester represents England. So we have a map of England over there. So we're trying our best working with Rachel and Reen to figure out how far back we can go to figure out what cultures these people represent. Outside of the fashion room, we have a series of posters that celebrates fashion. And here we're highlighting Yolanda Slucci. We have a quote from her. We have an inspirational messaging poster. We also created a poster that ties in with this of all the textiles we've made and how fabrics come from all over the world. I forget what's next. Okay, yes, I love this one. This one is really fun. This is one that I think was one of the first stories Reen and Rachel taught me of. We had already figured out that Margaret Hamilton had ties to MIT, and she's a pioneer in the software industry. And she helped write the code for Apollo 11 mission. But what Reen really helped me understand is that little ladies of Waltham had a humongous part in this story, and that they were typically women who used to work in the reading industry, and they would weave together ropes of cable that helped the software code go to the computer. And I can't explain it any better than that because I'm a graphic designer, I'm not in software, but they did important things and they were called the Little Ladies. So I remember Reen telling me that story one of the first times I went to the museum, and I just loved it. And that was the type of content that we were trying to find. I believe this is the last poster series that we're showing tonight. This one is not necessarily as Waltham related with JFK. He's more a Boston representation, but we wanted to put something outside of the language room and outside of one of the auditoriums that really exemplifies public speaking. A lot of students talked about how they wanted to learn better public speaking skills, be more confident, and communicate better. And JFK was a really good example that's really well known in Boston and in the Irish community, which is very important to Waltham. So we're branching out a little bit, but we're showing portrait of JFK, we're showing a map of Ireland, we're showing one of his quotes, and then we have some Celtic symbolism on the way. So these symbolism posters are throughout the school whenever we could fit them. I believe that's the last poster series that we're showing. So I'm going to pass it back over to Hillary, who's going to talk about the hallway breakouts.
Okay, so interior design approached us with a unique opportunity for graphics within the school. There are a number of breakout spaces in some of the main hallways for students that have seating and chairs. And this was something that was going to be created in tile. And so the opportunity here was, how can we create a custom mosaic for this space while incorporating that concept that I spoke to earlier. So here's an example of some traditional weavings specific to Honduras in this example, which, gave us the idea of how do we recreate these textiles in tile. Tile being sort of a challenge for this process, given the considerations, right? So it's very geometric. You only have certain shapes that you can work with, certain colors that go with the rest of the color scheme throughout the building. So this example here really just kind of shows you how a pattern like that really became the inspiration and how we can build this mosaic of patterns together. So in the next slide, we show the full wall, which is a very vibrant weaving together of all of these different representations of different cultures in one place. This was a huge challenge for us to try to envision and actually create how each of these tiles was going to come together to accurately represent many of these textiles. But ultimately what we ended up with, I think, is an amazing representation of the Waltham community and how all of these different patterns can really come together to create something beautiful. And on the next slide, we just show two more examples in elevation of what these tile walls will look like. These both being single height as opposed to the double height that you saw on the previous screen. But we just had so many textiles and assets to work with to get inspiration for all of these patterns. But again, we really wanted to make sure that we were sort of checking off all or as many as we could of the boxes of all of these different countries that could be represented. And then additionally, you'll see where we point out here, we're also going to have plaques on the wall that help students to identify what each of these patterns was inspired by. And so lastly, we just also wanted to show you the same concept translated over into the STEM wing. So again, taking this concept of patterning that we're utilizing so much from the cultural aspect in the humanities wing, and how can we do this for a more science and technology focused area. So in the examples here, you can see that we looked for ways to create these patterns out of tile. So we're showing strands of DNA, gears, we have lines that come together to show circuit boards, binary code. And so really we were just looking for any patterns that we could find that were STEM related to create this amazing and very interesting wall. And hopefully, students will also be able to identify some of these things here. And then I'll pass it back to Allie to talk about large group instruction space.
So this space, I believe, Wayne and the Historical Society were introduced to early on in the process, and then we came back to them about it. This is a large room that is on the 4th floor of the school and has an amazing view. Waiting for the slide to change. Okay, and there's going to be 3 main components in this room that I think are worth noting to this group of people. We will have a historical salvage fireplace, and we will have display cases for artifacts. And we were challenged with putting graphics into this room, but the room needs a certain number of acoustics in order to have the right sound vibration. I can't speak to that. But what we decided to do was we can print on fabric. So our plan is that we will be printing large format historical imagery on this acoustical paneling in the grays and the reds to bring the room together. And this room, I think, is going to be used for classes, meetings, all sorts of stuff. So we have 2 more really quick case studies that I thought this group would really like to see. One is the administration suite. We have a really nice opening graphic here. When you walk into the administration suite, we like to use a historic map of Waltham in the background. And then on top of that, we would like to have some 3D elements. We have some wood slats and we have the name Waltham on it. We really think this is a really sophisticated approach to entering into the administration suite. We also have a series of posters in here too. We chose to put our symbolism poster where we have all of our countries and each symbol kind of as an introduction in here space. And we also have some of those words, those attributes defined. We do have in here a poster to celebrate Mayor McCarthy. Hillary found this quote. She's shaking her head. Hillary found this quote of yours online, and hopefully it is accurate because we really did love it. So we do have a poster for you with a really, really tiny earth, which is hard to see here, but that is there. So that will be in the administration suite. And then lastly, the last case study is one of our common areas. Most of this is in the dining commons. One example is that. So we wanted to illustrate how we can take a more abstract approach to this theme of diversity. Hillary introduced you to using abstract shapes as a way to do this. In the dining commons, we have a really large 2-story wall. We will have a mural with these abstract shapes and a quote about diversity and unity. On the opposite wall of the dining commons, mirroring it, we will have a flag display. And these flags will not be fabric. They will be printed on acrylic and they will be hanging on the wall on a cleat so that the school can switch them out. Right now, what we're looking at is the current, I believe it's 27 countries that the current Waltham High School body represents. So we have all of those flags up there. It's going to be a really great display. And then right outside of the servery, we have raised elements spelling out one Waltham, and we have all the different areas of Waltham in different colors to mimic our style. And lastly, we have a couple of staircases in the school that have glass and a bench. And what we've decided to do is on each floor, we will have a different piece of a textile celebrated on film. So it will be white ink and the rest of it will be clear. So we wanted to really just show you, like, beyond the posters and beyond the tiles, that we have graphics throughout the school. They take all different forms and mediums. Some are literal and some are abstract. But throughout all of them, we really tried to illustrate Waltham, and we really tried to illustrate the diversity and the culture found in the city. That is everything. So I pass it back to Wayne.
All right, Ali, thank you. The handling of questions, I'm sure anyone who wants to submit a question through the chat, it would make life easier for us. If there's a question that you want to ask, you might wave your hand and we will do the best we can with the large audience to try and make sure that we do it in a sequence that is at least acceptable as possible to get folks a chance to ask questions. Anyone have any questions at this point thus far? I don't see any hands. I really appreciate the work that you've done. It's been interesting. Ali has been wonderful to work with, and I noticed that Jack, Hillary, Lorraine, and Sarah have all contributed quite a bit to this. Being a former graphics teacher at Waltham High School, I can appreciate the amount of work that you've done. It's huge. It's, I think, a tribute to Waltham's diversity. And I hope that when the school is open, that people will truly appreciate how much work has gone into it, how lucky we are to have this. Anyone have any questions? No? Well, that's good. That means you've answered all the questions in your presentation. That's great. All right. Well, I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. I noticed taking attendance here that City Councilor Kathy McMenamin joined us, and I was remiss in giving her the recognition. May, did you have your hand up? You're muted still, so can you unmute? There you go.
I just want to tell you, I saw these in the beginning, not all of them, but the vibrancy of the entire design has really come out. I mean, it's really amazing, the people that they talk to and everything. But as you go through the school, no matter where you are, it's light and bright and vibrant, and it represents everybody. So I'm very impressed how you've come to this point, Ellie, and the whole team. But it really, I think it's going to be a spectacular resource. And I want to thank the Waltham Historical Society for helping, because I think it's important that you connect the current with the past. And so, but I really love the colors, and I just think the whole school is going to be bright and airy and happy, and a wonderful opportunity for the kids. But that's all I can say right now, because I'm really blown away, because we just see the things, but then when you put them all together, and it really puts it together. So,
well, what I was impressed with was the fact that Allie and the team actually listened. When sometimes you deal with a project like this and you have people who have preconceived opinions and ideas of what is there, and these folks listened and actually asked questions to go beyond just the surface. And those of you that live in Waltham and have lived here a long time know how much there is here in this community, and that you don't have to go very far outside the bounds of Waltham to touch on as many different subjects, topics, and Waltham's being on the cutting edge, the forefront of pretty much every innovation since the 1630s. I think they listened and they put that into their database and came up with a piece that looks to me, and you can correct me if I'm wrong or if I'm just sort of prejudiced, but I think they did a nice job. I echo the words of the mayor that the colors, the vibrancy, it should be spectacular. All right, any more conversation?
Yeah, we do have a question in the chat from Eloise Lyman. It says, one question, read the stairway. It looks good on each side, but the middle part, and I'm not sure what she's asking exactly. Maybe she can elaborate. There you are.
Yes, hi. I guess, first of all, I want to say I'm a 1965 graduate of Waltham High School, and I'm just overwhelmed by the concept and the planning and the ideas. Now, as a senior, excuse me, I'm just wondering, students and teachers, et cetera, going down the middle part of the stairway, is that envisioned, or will people just be going up and down the stairs, you know, close to the railings on each side? Maybe it's because I am a senior. I'm looking at that middle and saying, holy cow, I need a railing.
So I can help with that. It's the image we're looking at right now. This is our dining commons. This is what we refer to as a learning stair. So the actual stair that you traverse to go from one story to another is the solid gray on the left with the railing. What is what is from the solid gray all the way over to the right, those are not every other step. Those are meant for seating, casual gathering, another space for students to have lunch on. And it's a combination of the concrete and wood that you see that gives it the color. Diversity in people, diversity in styles, diversity in how students want to gather. All these spaces help that. So not just the graphics, but not every student wants to sit at a table as we see in the foreground. We also have seating up on the upper level, ringing this whole dining commons for those students who may just want to get a high top and break out and be alone. Or if they want to move off to a small group and be on the stairs together, they can do that also. And it also doubles as almost like an amphitheater where we have a projection screen and we can hold movies in this space and they can do student presentations. So it's a newer development in the development of school design, but it really is trying to take advantage of every space and creating diversity of space as well.
Oh, great. Thank you. That sounds wonderful.
Sure.
Well, the school, I'm not sure how many folks are familiar with all of the details of the school, but the school is built around a plan, an educational plan, and a great deal of time was spent with many people who know education and who understand it from a lot of different aspects. And they put the plan together, and the plan is what the building was designed for, not the other way around. Some people think that buildings go up and then they plug them in, and that may have been the way they did it with places like the Wright School or some of the more recent or the older schools. But now the plan for education is what is important. And then how do you get that plan and execute it? The way you do that is in a building with the kind of thinking that is exemplified by just that one shot. I can understand how in my day that would have looked like a flight of stairs with handrails missing. And yet, as soon as it's explained, it makes perfect sense. And it does go beyond what the original thinking would have been when you look at that image. So, and that's not the only place in the school, in the building, that's going to be that way. There are a number of other aspects that would just blow your mind just the same way. So I'm excited. I can't wait to see it. And I'm hoping that when it's finished, the Historical Society will be one of the first groups allowed to get a tour, maybe.
I love the stairs. Now that you've explained that, thinking back to my own high school days, it eliminates the choice of which table to sit at. I love that. It's great. It looks beautiful, and being involved in the first steps of all of these ideas for the different panels and posters, it came together beautifully. You guys did a really wonderful job. So thank you guys.
Thanks, Rachel. I mean, we really couldn't have done it without you and Wayne. That was a good turning point in the project for us, where the internet could only go so far. And then we heard about all these stories from you and Wayne that we probably would not have uncovered.
Well, we're learning new stories every day, Allie. It seems as though people do research to write books, and they trace it back to the origin, and somehow that seems to come back to Waltham, and it's truly amazing. You think every community has history. There's no question of that. But with Waltham's history, it seems as though this has been an incubator for innovation from the outset, and you can't help but trip over something new every day. It's amazing. I'm going to go on too much. I don't mean to, but it's something that's nice and enjoyable to be a part of. Well, if there are no other questions, I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. Really kind of hate to end this because it's been so enjoyable.
Say anything, just say goodbye.
I'm sorry, was that Alan? Was that?
Yes, I was just saying what a wonderful presentation. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you very much. Yep, they did a great job. Jack, Hillary, Allie, Lorraine, Sarah, thank you so much. Mayor McCarthy, Superintendent Regan, and Kathy McMenamin, thank you for coming tonight. It's really great to see you, and it's nice to have you at the helm of what's going on in the new school. So thank you very much. And hopefully you'll all come back for future lectures from the Historical Society. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye, thanks.
Thank you.
Good night
Thank
now.
you.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
See ya.